Hi there, we're going to get started in just a few seconds. I want to confirm sound and video, and we will begin our session. Thanks for joining today. I'll go ahead and keep talking. It makes checking your audio all that easy, much easier. Something tells me we're probably good. Excellent. Hi there. Welcome to the latest edition of the Adobe XD Tips and Tricks. I am Dani Beaumont, and I work on the Adobe XD team. Interestingly enough, the topic for this session is going to be tips and tricks. So I rooted around a bit and looked for what I found to be about 10 or 15 different tips that I think we can cover in this next half hour. If you have additional tips and tricks, you are welcome to send them my way. I really love gathering them. I've been using XD now for about almost a year. So some of those first impressions and tricks I think I've taken for granted. But I love hearing what's working well for you out there in the real world. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over my screen and we will get started. Okay. Just a quick mention before I step away from this screen. The next session we're going to do is going to be in March, and that one is focused on how to take sketch content and bring it over to XD, how to take your existing workflows, take your files, and move it towards XD. I think even if you're a Power Sketch user, XD offers some really nice prototyping features for that workflow. So I'm going to dig in on that one as our next topic. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the tips and tricks. So let's see here. I find that it's awfully nice when you're scrubbing through tips and tricks to be able to get some guidelines about it. So if you're watching this video, look for these markers so you can get right to the point. We're going to start with the first tip. Let's go ahead and go back into design mode. Try that one more time. So very first one, we're going to focus a little bit on typography. How do you easily paste text from the clipboard to create an area container, or basically just the truth that you can do that? So if I come on over to what I just closed, if I go back to the browser, just here, and switch over. Let's say I grab some text that's either on an existing website or can be anywhere, anything that's on the clipboard. If I come in and grab that and copy it to the clipboard, this was one of the things that I found really difficult to intuit, I guess. XD is very much about designing at the speed of thought. So we try to reduce friction as much as possible for you. But sometimes I find that really delivers some real subtle capabilities that are hard to follow. So I have content here on the clipboard. If I just come here to the clipboard and paste on that clipboard, I get a text container. So it automatically does that for me. I don't have to go over, create a container, and then paste inside of it. This does bring up one of the things that confused me quite a lot. Is there's another capability which is known as the point tool for text. So there's an area container and then there's a point, what they call point text. The way that works is, let me just show you this. If I type T on the keyboard to switch over to the text tool, when I press and drag, that creates a container, and within the container I can come in and paste content. So if I paste this, notice how big my cursor's there. It's actually remembering the last text that I had selected. So if I select this guy, let's try that one more time. And well, I'm just going to go ahead and go with big text here. So if I reduce this guy back out, we'll go back to, say, about 12 point. Let's see how the demo gods are going to treat me today. We'll try that there. Okay. So I have that area text defined. If instead of pressing and dragging with the text tool, so if I type T again to bring up that text tool, and I just click and release on the canvas, and then I hit Command V or Control V to paste that text. Still using an awfully fun typeface here. Let's switch it to something a little bit more readable. Try this guy. How about that one? Notice that I have a pretty big font that's here. I'd like to reduce it. So unlike the text that's in this text container, the area text tool has this really nice little control here that allows you to visually resize the text. So if I just press and drag now, I can come in and resize that text. If you're looking on the right-hand side of the screen in the Properties Inspector, you can see that it's dynamically telling me that value. So I can always numerically resize text. I can hit Command Shift and the larger sign or lesser sign, so that kind of caret sign, to go in and reduce or increase the size in increments. So let me just show you that. I'm going to come in and select all these, hit Shift Command or Shift Control. Greater than sign is going to make it greater. Lesser than size. Demo gods are not going to help me out today. Lesser than will make the text smaller within the container, but that's a little bit of a few steps to get there. Using this point text handle here, I can just press and drag to resize it. Now, nuances between the two here. This text container, once I have it the size that I want, it has the ability to come in and let the text flow within that container. When you have less text, having this nice point text available allows you to go in and visually resize it. But anytime I'd want to make a break in the text, I would need to come in and hit Shift Return to do a hard break to actually break that line of text. Okay, number 1 done. I'm going to go ahead and jump to number 2. Click on this artboard, and actually the tip for the next tip that I wanted to talk about is actually this trick that I'm doing in the keyboard to resize the canvas and focus it where I'd like it to be. So there are keyboard shortcuts available. Maybe Gabrielle can do me a solid and do a quick Google search for Adobe XD keyboard shortcuts. So we do have them available. They're in a printable form. They have shortcuts that are there. But some of them, it just takes a while to internalize them. So when I'm presenting, I find myself an awful lot zooming in, zooming out to try to get to content. The Command 0, I believe, will take me to actual size. No, it's going to actually shrink everything on the canvas so that I can see all of my artboards. I think Command 1 takes you out to actual size. And obviously, when I have nothing selected on the canvas there, let's try that one. It's not going to jump to the area that I want. The nice one that I really like, so this tip, is to use Command 3. What it will do is take whatever you have selected and bring it into size or into view. So if I select 3 artboards here, hit Command 3, all 3 of those elements are going to be visible. If instead I come in and grab just a chunk of text or an object within an artboard, if I hit Command 3, it's going to zoom me right into that content. So again, hitting Command 0 will take me back out fully. If I go back to where I was here, hitting Command 3 is bringing this nice artboard into view. If I want to jump to the next one, sort of elegantly, let's say I am presenting not using the desktop preview app or the browser, but actually presenting within the artboards here, it's awfully nice to be able to click on that next artboard and hit Command or Control 3. So got a couple folks saying hi. I see Eric is here, and Khalud Masamari from Tanzania. It's great to have you on board. I'm a big fan of comments and conversations. So if you have questions as we go along or have any tips of your own that you want to toss into the mix, please do let me know. I would love to hear it, but thanks for joining. Okay, we're going to keep going. Next one, with my fancy new keyboard combination, is point text versus area text for easy resize. That's kind of funny because demo gods are not going to cooperate for me. Okay, that's all right. We've jumped to number 3 already. So first one was simply being able to take it from the clipboard and drop it onto the canvas. The second is this topic we talked about, which was point text. All right, on to tip number 4. Okay, convert text to editable outlines. This one was a surprise to me. I bumped into it this last month. As I mentioned, I've been working with XD for a year at this point. But if you have any text that you want to work with, let's say, ordinarily what I would do would be to take it over into something like Adobe Illustrator, convert it to outlines, and then bring it back as an SVG into the XD application. Instead, what I can do is select that text. Let's go ahead and give it a bit more of a aggressive typeface. We could try. That's not more aggressive. Let's try something a little bit funky here. I'm going to go with serifs, what I'm doing. I know it's very retro, but let's say I wanted to work with this text and convert it to outlines. With it selected, if I hit Command 8 on the keyboard, so Control on Windows or Command on Mac, and the number 8, it doesn't look like anything happened. It's kind of a little subtle. It changes the selection state to basically selecting the full group of all the objects. But if I come in now, let's go ahead and zoom in and select any one item. So I double click there to select the vectors inside of that. Double click again to come on into this object. I'll probably need to go in. Let's just see. I'm going to try. All right, I'm going to come on in here and notice that I have vectors here. I can come in and just start to make changes. So it's editable text from there forward. Okay, that's tip number 4. Sliding down to tip number 5. So creating styles from objects on the canvas. You may already know this. As I mentioned, I think it's a pretty subtle truth. Notice in the project that I'm working on now, I have colors that are here. I have character styles that have been saved out as part of the project. I'm going to do this. We'll see if I get in trouble with it. I'm going to go ahead and let's undo that for a second. Come on in and select all of those colors, and I'm just going to delete them. So with them selected, I'll right click on the objects and select delete. So they're no longer there. I kind of want to go back to the default state. Let's just do that with colors for now. So if I come on out now and take a look at kind of a style guide that I have here on the right-hand side, I have a number of colors that are here that I'm using throughout the project. There's also a lot of text that's here. If I want to easily bring these colors into my assets panel so I can reuse them easily, I can just go on and click on, it all depends on my selection state. So if I just clicked on color swatches, it would limit it to that. If I click on just one artboard, it's going to limit the selection set to just the one artboard. If I select everything on the canvas, it's going to bring every color that's in this project. So I'm going to go ahead and just have that one artboard selected. And in the assets panel on the color section here, I'm going to click on the right-hand side. And it brings in a bunch of colors that are in use in this project or in this particular artboard. So that's really great. It's a nice feature to be able to bring that in that way. I can do the same with text. So I can select any subset of content and extract from that text styles that are defined there. So those styles include both the typeface. Let's go ahead and take a look at that a little bit. If I come on down here, I can see which attributes are associated with it. So it has character spacing, line spacing, typeface. I can get a bit of a preview here. If I switch over to the tile view, I can actually get a little bit more of those details. So I see it a little bit more in action. So it actually types out the full word in the typeface that I'm working with. Now, one thing you'll notice is because I went over to some work from another project, this mood board here or this style guide, and placed it into this project and did that extraction, I'm getting a whole lot of repetition, a lot of redundancy. So if you look at the colors, as the person that was designing the style guide was working, they perhaps couldn't really decide which shade of yellow they wanted to work with. And as the project became more extensive, it started to get a little messy. So the tip that I'd like to talk about is how you can quickly come in and unify colors and text styles. So one bit about the assets panel, we added a capability that allows you to come on in and select a color and just drag it in the hierarchy here. So drag it in location. And I could organize all my yellows together. If I'm concerned about where each of the colors are in use, I can come here to it and say, go ahead and highlight that on the canvas to let me know where that color is being used. And in all honesty, I'm kind of surprised with all these shades of yellow from this set here, but it could be one of these. It's probably all nested inside this guy here. Notice how it has different shades of yellow. Now, perhaps as I'm working, I don't want all of those shades of yellow. What I can quickly do to just unify them is, because it may be that I've been working, I've got 15 artboards and I've used 2 different shades of yellow, and I honestly don't want to go to every instance and replace the color manually on the design canvas. What I can do instead is come on into this color and copy its value. So I just double clicked on the label. By default, it's going to have the hex value as the label or the name of that color. Once I've done that, I can come to another color here, right click on it, and under edit here, just go in and change that color value. So if I come into the hex value here, paste that. Now watch a little bit to see the magic happen here. So as you notice, I've got a number of yellows here. I've got 2 very similar yellows. I've taken the yellow color from this first one and I've pasted that hex value. If the demo gods want to cooperate with me, what XD is going to intuit from that is that I want to merge those 2 colors together. So if I click off, notice I have 1 less yellow color. If I hit undo, let's just show that one more time. So I come to that second instance. In edit, I'm going to paste the hex value. And when I click off, it's going to merge it. So effectively, it's going to find all instances of that first shade of yellow and replace it with the second values that I define. So to a certain extent, the character styles behave in that same manner. If I come in and find the text attributes, notice here I've got, some text samples. I may decide that having 26 and 22 is way too close in size, but I've emulated the same font and spacing, things of that sort. I can come in and edit one of those instances, and it's going to automatically merge all of those onto the design canvas. Okay, let's go back to our laundry list. I'm going to check and see. Everyone is still incredibly quiet. Jonathan's joined. Good to see you, Jonathan. Nobody even wants to weigh in on the tips yet. That's okay. So we went ahead and did this first tip, which is to come in and create styles from objects on the canvas. And then I jumped to the next one, which is how to quickly merge color styles and apply that same capability to text styles. All right, let's see what we've got else here. So change transparency values using number keys. This one's a little tricky. You may know it already, but again, I thought it was pretty fascinating. So as I'm working, let's say you're not sure about colors and you're looking in context of other content that you might have on your design canvas. It can be clumsy to have to jump out to the properties inspector every time you want to fiddle with the color, for example. Let's go ahead and close my layers panel for a moment here and move this guy here. Now I can do the magic again and zoom on in a little more tightly. When I have any object that has a fill color applied to it, one of the tips is that I can come in and change the percentage value using number keys. So with this object selected, I'm not over in the properties inspector at all. Just here on the design canvas, I can type 1 on the keyboard. If you, and basically it's going to change that value. Notice here in the appearance panel, that color is the same, but it's changed to 10%. I'm going to continue just typing numbers on the keyboard to increase that value. That's 80%, 90%, and then back up to 100%. So that may be something you already knew, but there's also another one that I thought was pretty interesting and tricky. So generally speaking, more broadly with XD, if I have an object on the canvas and I want to move that object, I can use the arrow keys and move 1 pixel at a time as I move the content, but it doesn't get me very far. If I hit the shift key, I can move in increments of 10. So I can move the object 10 pixels by hitting shift and the arrow key. If I just hit the arrow key, it's going to move 1 pixel. So this sort of power of 10 when holding the shift key is actually available in lots of places within the application. So let's say I'm working on this shade of green and I want to work again more visually. I don't want to have to go in and dial up all of the numbers. If I come into the fill dialog here within the properties inspector, I've got my hex value, but if I jump over to HSB, let's say, with that first field kind of selected there, I'm going to hit Shift and the up key on my keyboard. And what it does is it's going to change that value, my hue value, by 10 increments at a time, so a value of 10. I can hit the Tab key to jump over and deal with the saturation now. So change out the saturation by just hitting that Command key as I work, hit Tab again, and change out the brightness of the color as I'm working. So just a nice way to dig into that color panel and right on the design canvas start to be able to see the effect of what you're doing, like making incredibly bright squares green colors there, which was annoying. So I had to fix it. So I thought that one was pretty fun. Still, the chat is quiet. I don't know, people. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next power tip. We're going to go with tip number 8. Another one that I actually like. See, we're moving right along too quickly for my own good. So we changed transparency value, and we've also changed HSB values. So as I'm presenting here, I decided to give myself a reminder, as you're seeing. And then as I'm working, I kind of wanted to get rid of this overlay and have content down behind the original here. And a lot of folks know that you can lock content or delete content or stack it behind. One nice power user tip is to be able to just change the visibility on an object using a keyboard command. So I have this as an overlay. It's stacked on top of the other elements. We can even come in and take a look at this for a moment. So here's my artboard, and I have the overlay group that sits on top of some actual artwork content. And if I come on in and zoom this guy back so I can see it, and go into that artboard, I can see it there. As I'm working conversationally, if I don't want to have to go to the layers panel and hide things, move things, things of that sort, I can just come in and select this overlay that I have and then hit Command on the Mac or Control on Windows and the semicolon. So if I hit Command semicolon, it just changes the visibility for that layer so that it's out of my way. I can toggle that back by going to the layers panel, because once it's not visible, you can't necessarily make it visible again. So once again, though, just hitting Command and semicolon will change the visibility for that object. So a nice fun one. Okay, what do we got next? Power tip number 9. So the repeat grid is probably one of the biggest wow features for XD. It definitely is powerful. And we've probably all seen the demos that show how to use repeat grid. But there's some nice corner cases that I thought were pretty innovative around that feature. So I'll come on in and hide this layer, as we know. And let's say I'm working. You probably know that with the repeat grid, I can come to any bit of content, and if I want to repeat it, let's say I want this to be a list, I can move it up and with the content selected. So I'll come on in and select all that content, click the repeat grid, which allows me to repeat this as a list as I'm working. One feature though, so if I come on in there and I can change the spacing here. So that's kind of a common use for the feature. But one of the nice things is to actually use repeat grid as you're working, depending on what you're doing. So for example, I've got a line here. If I wanted to quickly do a hamburger menu, I'm a big fan of keyboard commands. So if I hit Command or Control R, it's going to basically click this repeat grid option and make that a repeat grid component that I can now press and drag until I get that nice hamburger menu. So I can come in, increase the space there. Once I've done this, I may go in and break apart that repeat grid. So I can always hit Shift Command G to ungroup it, or hit that button there on the right-hand side to ungroup it and then work with that as just a design element. So that's kind of one use case. It used to be before we had dashes for lines, you would use this to do a dashed line. And in some instances, there may be some custom line work that could be useful for. XD does a pretty good job now with dots and dashes. But let's say you're working on a rating system and you want to quickly come in and differentiate the ratings for your elements here. One thing I'm going to do real quickly, let's see if I can pull this off. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back down to a single item. And I'll go ahead and ungroup it so it's standing on its own. I'm going to select the star in this group set. And with that selected, let's go ahead and zoom in a little tighter. I'll go ahead and invoke that repeat grid feature. And I can do a rating system here. So I might decide that this should be 3.5 stars for this particular movie. You'll also see things like learn more or get more details using dots of this sort. So I can take this custom circle, define it with the repeat grid, and get on in here. Let's try that again. I'm going to move this out of the way. I want to do kind of the ellipsis 3 dots. And this is all awfully horsey big, but I could adjust the size as I worked if I wanted as well. So a nice way to do an ellipsis there and the stars. Once I've done that, I can select this set now, invoke the repeat grid, and do a nice list. Now from there, when you're working with repeat grids, there's an extent to which you can vary the content. So I can easily come in and just get on the word sparrow here and change this to a different name. I'm curious if I come to this guy. Yeah, notice that when I'm working with the stars now, any change I make, it's a global change. So if I change it in one instance, it's going to change it in all. So one of the things you want to do with the whole repeat grid feature is it's kind of like creating a master, of course. So you want to come in and make all of the major changes that are going to be consistent across all of your instances. Once you've done that, I want to come to this repeat grid group, and I'm going to go ahead and ungroup the grid. And from here, I believe the world will be kind, I can come to this element, which is also a repeat grid, and start to change the ratings. So because I've saved it as a repeat grid element, I can come in and vary it on a per title instance here, just to show the ratings really quickly without having to laboriously come in and duplicate those stars over and over again. All right. People are still quiet. I'm glad Jonathan's happy to be here. I'm happy to have you, Jonathan. Let's see, what else do we have? Paste and place across multiple artboards. This is one that we introduced last year. I don't know that people know about it enough because, again, it's a pretty subtle capability. So let's say I'm working and there's a couple tricks to this. Let's say I have a number of artboards. So maybe I'm going to just do this rough, obviously. A phone artboard, maybe a tablet artboard, maybe a desktop. Obviously, my proportions are a bit off here. And as I'm working, what I want to do is bring over this element. So I'm going to unlock it and copy it. Now, what I'd like to do is have it go to the lower corner of all of these elements. And to just prove this point a little bit, let's make this an extraordinarily small phone. So definitely much shorter in height than the source. So the way paste in place works is if I select an object, we're going to attempt to try to guess what your intention is here. So if I copy that to the clipboard and then select all 3 of these artboards and then select edit paste or hit Command V or Control V on the Mac, I'm getting interesting results, and that's kind of good. But I want to explain it for a moment. So when you're working, if you have the same exact size artboard, so let me try to do this one more time so I can explain it a bit better. Thinking to myself. I'll bring this guy up. Let's just put it in this corner for a moment. And I'm going to copy it. And I also want, let's try to do this exactly the same. 1638, of course. So I'm looking at kind of the height of my artboard. 1638. Okay. So with these three selected here, I'm going to come in and just hit Command or Control V to paste. So what XD has done is said it looks like you're in the upper left-hand corner of this artboard. The other artboards are of different size. So when possible, XD is going to attempt to guess how it can place it in that inner corner. By the way, if I were to zoom in a little bit, even though I have all three of these artboards selected, if I zoomed in so that I was only seeing two artboards and I hit paste, when I step out, it didn't paste on that corner artboard. Our assumption is if you're not looking at the artboard, what you don't want to do is accidentally select hundreds of artboards and paste it too far. So the rule for where you're pasting the destination is that all the artboards should be in view at the time that you do that paste. And then we're going to attempt to put it in the same place. So let's say I had this object now, and it was much smaller and rather towards the center as I'm working. If I come to these two artboards, so if I step out, select that first instance, and then come to these two guys here to select these artboards, and then paste it, notice that it's positioning it at the same X and Y location, even though these are different size artboards. So for example, if you're having some iOS controls up towards the top of your artboard and you want to repeat that top navigation to like-size artboards, this can be incredibly handy. You can paste it very quickly on multiple artboards. All right, I've eaten up my half hour, so I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to switch back over to the tips and tricks. Just to share for a moment, there is a YouTube channel. So if you go and look for Ping Dani on YouTube, you will find a bunch of launch videos. So whenever we have a new release, there's a bunch of new feature videos that are there. There's also the recordings for these past tips and tricks sessions. So you can always watch the recording after the fact and find it. If you can't find it here on Facebook, that YouTube channel is a good place to keep it in mind. And as I mentioned, next month we're going to dig in a little bit onto workflows where you're taking Sketch content and bringing it over to XD and really trying to leverage the advantage of XD in context of Sketch and also easily transfer your content over. So reusable elements from Sketch that you can put into your everyday workflow. All right, with that, thank you for your time, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again for the next tips and tricks.